Jamey, so awesome to see you again. I know it's been a while since we connected at a Black Hat, and things change. Things are going really fast in cybersecurity as always. So I just want to get your perspective on the job market for CISOs, for director and VP level cybersecurity executives, and specifically from three separate perspectives. For someone who is fairly happy in his or her role, but maybe 6 months to a year looking for potentially for a change, what should they know about the state of the market and what can someone do in that position? The second group would be someone who is kind of the writing is on the wall, 2 months, 3 months, they'll be out of the position, and what can they do now to set them up for success? And the third group, for someone who's been looking for a job or has been in the market for maybe a handful of weeks or maybe even a handful of months, knowing what you know and seeing what you see, what do you suggest they should do to kind of set them up for success in identifying a new chapter in their career? Again, it's fairly loaded, but I'm just wondering if maybe we can address them one by one.
Yeah, and I think there are, I'll preface this with the fact that there are some consistent themes across all the situations. I think the obvious difference is that the sense of urgency is going to vary, of course, from one to the other. And not only a sense of urgency, but potentially the pressure to make a decision and, the potential in the last of the three to be more likely to make a suboptimal decision due to near-term considerations. So I'll preface it with that, but I think starting with the first, where I get this a lot with executives who, for any host of reasons, well, just generally speaking, want to know what might be out there just in case. Some of it is, hey, I'm always looking for an interesting challenge. Not that I'm not enjoying what I'm doing here, but there's some opportunities when they knock on your door, you're going to take that call, whatever that might be. It's a really marquee company or a really primo role. Or sometimes things run their course, and my experience has been that CISOs and CIOs, frankly, in a lot of ways are cut from the same cloth in that they're borderline adrenaline junkies. They like to fix things or build them or turn them around or transform them or whatever. And once they've been on board an organization for a handful of years, and that's actually a pretty long tenure in this day and age, they get to the point where a little bit more maintenance mode as opposed to when they first joined is just not really what jazzes them on a day in, day out basis. So for that cohort, my advice is typically always the time to build a network and just be aware of what's happening in the market is never when you need it. It's way ahead of time. And I think the other benefit of being knowledgeable what's in the market and staying in touch with recruiters and and your peers is you can learn a lot about what's happening, even if you're not necessarily inclined to make a move immediately. So how does that manifest itself as far as what you should be doing? There's a few things. I think it's always a good idea as an executive to maintain a good, healthy relationship with a handful of executive recruiters, not just myself, but my peer group. It behooves you to, my apologies for the corny analogy, this is a case where you do want a bigger attack surface because each firm is going to have a certain number of opportunities, and you want to be on their radar to hear about them. So first thing, not the first, but the first thing that comes to mind is establish and maintain good rapport, good relationships with executive recruiters. Take their calls. You can hear a little bit about intel, what's happening in the market, as I've mentioned. You can help out your fellow compatriots who may be looking, and even though the timing's not right for you, it can be a win-win in that you can provide the recruiter with a good referral. You can be in their good graces. You'll be more likely to get the call in the future when an opportunity might be a fit for you. And you may be able to help one of your peers or frankly someone on your team to hear about an opportunity they may not have otherwise, and give them a good career opportunity. Another thing I would say is you should always be thoughtful about managing your own brand and your own presence online, whether it's through LinkedIn, attending events, whether it's Evanta, HMG, or otherwise, and stay abreast of what's happening. Make sure you're you're just on top of what's happening in the market. You're on top of the latest trends with respect to what's impacting you and your peer group. That way you're going to be that much more prepared when the opportunity does come to present yourself in a, it's going to be pretty competitive. Let's face it. If a client comes to me or one of my peers, the expectation is we're going to deliver them pardon my phrase, a rock star lineup of really good candidates. And if we do our job correctly, there's going to be pretty stiff competition. So it'll better position you to be in the know, have had these conversations, so you're better equipped, I think, to interview well. And then, I think that it's always a good idea to have your resume updated. I think that's kind of essentially a no-brainer. Yeah, you probably don't want to do it the first 2 months into your new role, but every year or two, at least, it's good to refresh that, make sure you have that ready to go, so you're not having to dust that off should the right opportunity come your way. And I think at the end of the day, it never hurts to stay abreast of dynamics in the market, what's happening just through different channels, trade magazines, whatever it is where you get information that's happening. And then, I personally have used a third party to give me a little bit of advice on how do I optimize my LinkedIn profile. I think it's always a good thing to make sure you're keeping that up to date, so that even if you're not actively looking, you are that much more of an attractive target as a passive candidate should a fantastic opportunity come up and someone like me wants to reach out and run it by you. So those are some of my thoughts on the more of the, I would call it the passive, but open to hearing about opportunities candidate.
Well, you're certainly doing a very good job on LinkedIn, because your posts are all over my feed, like every day, every other day I see something and I see that they're liked and shared. So whatever it is that you're doing, it's most definitely working. But kind of to sum it up, it sounds like, one, build the network before you need it, not when you need it. Invest in building your personal brand through social media, probably LinkedIn more so than other platforms, and maybe speaking engagements where available. And be informed of opportunities that are they're out there. Though, did I get this?
I think you're right. Yeah, and so it's one thing to, we are going to usually have a pretty good network but I can never know everyone. How am I going to find those people? LinkedIn is an obvious place. Sometimes you can go to a company's website and find the CISO. Sometimes you can't. But I think also thought leadership that you could post, like we're going to be looking for who is a respected speaker at a conference, who is out there. And I think there's a healthy balance. If every week you're sitting on a panel somewhere, some people may say, well, when are you doing your actual job? But I think there's a balance to be struck. And I think ultimately it comes down to relationships. The network piece, yes, but the next step in that evolution is just not to be connected to people, but to build good, genuine relationships and stay in touch with people. It's never too early to start, and should just continue throughout your career.
Certainly. Awesome. And kind of switching gears for someone who's has more of an immediate need to start looking.
Yeah, I think that's where you want to ramp up more of your revisiting and letting know those, ideally, assuming you've built relationships with different retained recruiters, that, hey, I'm looking, here are my parameters, be very transparent with them. And obviously we will be very discreet about what it is, but it's just good for us to know. Yeah, I'm keeping in mind versus, hey, I am very, very interested. I'm going to make a move. I want to start looking. And that's where you're going to leverage not just this network of recruiters, but your peer group, others out in the market, because not all searches come to a search firm. And I would say probably just as frequently, it may be people know of you through a network, or someone who's an internal recruiting is going to reach out to you. That's where you definitely want to beef up your resume. You definitely want to really make sure your LinkedIn profile is spot on. And especially if you could do so not being as discreet about it, it depends on whether or not your organization knows you're going to be leaving. That will obviously determine to what extent you could be more aggressive about getting it out there. And then just be clear about what it is you're looking for and what you're not, so that I think that'll help you to really prevent boiling the ocean, if you will, as far as going out and proactively looking for things.
Certainly,
Whether it's
certainly.
geography, industry, type of role. Is it a CISO role, or are you interested in doing something different? We haven't really talked about that yet, but I'm finding more and more CISOs now are maybe a little less inclined to go rinse and repeat. There's not as many new greenfield build opportunities as there might have been before, and more and more CISOs are taking on the CIO role, or some of them are going to be operating partners of private equity firms, or they're actually going to be an investor and or an advisor at like venture capital or private equity firms. And so another thing would be thinking about what is it you want to do next, and if there's other things you want to do, well then that might present more opportunities outside of the limited number of CISO opportunities that are in the market at any given time.
Interesting. So it's a completely different tack where you leverage your expertise and your connections and your experience without the pressure and the stress of maintaining the security profile and avoiding ransomware attacks and breaches, and you getting probably compensated handsomely in the VC private equity world.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a point in time where people's passion can change. If I think of a couple of examples of probably pretty well known amongst our peer group, you've got Emily Heath, who is now at Cyber Starts, and you've got Justin Samani just joined YL Ventures. They literally have completely changed gears, and they're going to be more on the investment side. They bring a unique and a different perspective, a little bit of a learning curve for both of them, operating a different capacity, but I think both have purposely prepared to do something a little bit different.
And Emily, I think she was a CISO at an airline, American Airlines.
She was United Airlines, and she's
United
her DocuSign, yes.
Amazing.
But I know Emily well, and she'd previously been building out a broader skill set to position herself to do something a little bit different over time. So yeah, there's more and more people thinking about, is there a different career path for me?
But assuming that someone who wants to stay within cybersecurity and looking at the VP or C-level role, I mean, executive search, in the end of the day, it's fundamentally it's the art and science of matchmaking. You have your clients with a search mandate and your potential pool of candidates, and you're trying to find the best possible set of matches for the client to select from, which is interesting, because if I know I'm looking for a job within 2 months, the perfect opportunity may or may not come within this time frame. So, and I know that the market has changed recently. I don't know if it's true anymore, but for a while I was hearing from our members that the search that they thought would take them 2-3 months was taking way longer, and then the expectations in terms of compensation were changing, and responsibilities, and all this kind of combined with additional scrutiny and upcoming regulations, it creates a very interesting kind of mix. From that perspective, how do you suggest people should think about calibrating their requirements so that they don't pass up a good opportunity in hopes that the better will come up, and when it doesn't, they effectively put themselves in a much worse position from the leverage standpoint? How should people think in terms of that, and specifically in regards to timing and calibrating their expectations given the state of the market? So I just want to get a sense, where's the market now in terms of those kind of positions, CVP level positions?
I guess my initial reaction is it's always going to be a challenge. At certain levels of seniority, there's just a more limited number of opportunities that fit the parameters of what are going to make sense to you, whether it's geography, the nature of the role itself, industry, scale, compensation. There's a lot of factors that have to be right. And then, oh, by the way, you're probably going to compete against a pool of other really good candidates. So initially, I would say manage expectations. It's likely to be more competitive than you hope, and it's likely to take more time and likely to be more frustrating than you might think.
Why frustrating?
Frustrating because you think, yeah, I could do this job. I'm a really talented CISO. I've got a great track record, and that may be so, but there may not be that many roles that are open at that time that fit all the parameters that are most important to you. And there may be there will likely be a handful of others that are going to compete for it, unless it's someone you worked for before and said, hey, Misha, I've got a role open, come on over. and it's not a competitive process, but that is less likely, I think, to happen. So I think however much time you think it might take, double that so that you manage your own expectations. The other piece is, and this will bleed into the next one where you're pretty sure you're going to be out in a few months versus, hey, I'm out, our company was acquired, there's been a riff or whatever, then all of a sudden you're in a position where your timelines change even more so. And it's the age old, bird in the hand versus two in the bush sort of thing. In an ideal world, you have your preferred opportunity come to fruition around the same time of others, but Murphy's Law would tell you that's unlikely to happen. So I think you just have to, a couple things. One is be ready to accept or consider a role that may be perfectly good, but maybe not in your eyes perfect. Because you may miss an opportunity, and then 6 months later you're frustrated and you're thinking, wow, I'm out of the game now. Am I going to be less and less attractive to a potential hiring organization? And you want to weigh being in that position versus waiting for that perfect role that may not come through. So there's no right or wrong answer, but you really have to be ready to think through, how long can I wait, both mentally and financially? And how okay am I taking something that may not be in my eyes perfect, but is going to keep me employed, keep me engaged? It may not be the end all be all, but will perhaps position me for something else down the road. So it's really striking a balance between near term and longer term perspectives. And it's not easy. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of executives who are in that position, and they're wrestling with, boy, what do I take on this role, or do I wait for something I think is a little bit better?
It's interesting because I think it's also kind of time is not on your side, right? So as time goes by, you lose leverage and kind of and self-doubt kind of starts seeping in and all those things. And so it's to your point, it's very on a personal level. I think circumstances are very different, but it's something to keep in mind that it's kind of as time goes by, there are so many factors you do not control. So
there are, and one thing it feels like there's been more and more ample opportunity for executives to do is to be an advisory or even fractional roles. If you think about smaller to medium-sized organizations who security, they could be attacked just as much as any other company, but they may not have the resources or inclination to hire a full-time information security officer, but they're hungry for and really need support. So that could be a bridge to keep you engaged, keep you relevant, get a little bit of money coming in, and maybe give you a little bit more breathing room, so you feel like you'd be less likely to make a suboptimal decision or just be frustrated without doing anything. So it feels like there are more and more CISOs that have been able to do that and enjoy themselves, and it could be a bridge to a full-time role, or some of them just say, I really like this, I'm just going to keep doing it. The obvious challenge there is that there's a different pressure of where's my next business coming from. So it's a little bit of a different stress, of course.
For sure. And then from the experience of your clients and the CISOs, where do you see people compromise more frequently? Is it the comp, location, scope, size of the company? What, again, maybe not very adequate question, because I think it's probably very individual, but kind of just a gut feel.
My gut would be, of course, if someone is not currently working, they may be more inclined to say, hey, I don't need an increase versus where I was. If I could stay even with where I was, I'd be happy. So that's a pretty reasonable compromise. Or maybe, and along with that compensation, maybe just because the organization is a little bit smaller and scale or industry wise may not pay what you would have had otherwise, but they feel they could be successful and still learn something. And so sometimes they'll compromise a little bit more on the industry or scale. I feel like the one area where, especially since COVID, people have been more accustomed to the fact that, hey, I'm not going to disrupt my personal life or my family. My experience has been the one area that's less likely to afford any flexibility is on location.
Interesting.
And if they got kids in high school or otherwise, like, hey, I'm willing to travel, maybe a little less pay, but you know, the personal aspects of the decision, I think are perhaps even more prominent maybe than they were a few years ago when it comes to the whole relocation and they're really not wanting to disrupt their families or uproot
Certainly.
them.
But I think it's also like with COVID, so many companies got used to either remote, fully remote, or hybrid, and people are commuting, right? Even if it's hybrid, if I'm not co-located, I can
Yeah.
play in every other way.
The pendulum's coming back a little bit more to the middle on that. There's some organizations now that are a little leaning in a little bit more to require a certain location. It's certainly not across the board, but I'm finding that's more, we've had to look either in a specific location or require someone to relocate more so than I did a couple years ago.
Interesting.
So there's still a blend.
I hear that was true from what I'm hearing more about financial services and kind of New England, New York area. There, some of the banks are more stringent around along those lines. But it's
well, they've got a lot of expensive real estate to fill.
For sure.
I think they may be leaning a little bit more for that reason. I mean, I'm speculating, but it seems pretty reasonable for that to be a reason that you know, they're doing some more than they were in the past.
Well, I'm sure it's part of the consideration. And again,
Yeah.
switching gears for someone who's been out for a few weeks or maybe a few months, slim pickings on their opportunities, what do you recommend that what's some of the action steps they could take to make them find an opportunity that will be a good fit and will make them happy?
Yeah, and I think maybe I bled over from the prior one and bucket into this one on the whole doing virtual work, find a way to be engaged, and sometimes it might even be firms, so you don't have to put out your own shingle. You know, it's more on the CIO front, but like 40M Partners, for example, is a CIO group. I'm not sure to what extent they do CISO work, but it's a way that you could find a home and keep yourself engaged and then maybe parachute in later into the role. Could be a bit of a bridge. Really aggressive networking, obviously going to events and then, you know, depending upon, once again, your mental appetite to not be working. Now, some people it may be more important to say, I just need to be working. I'm not as concerned about compensation. I got to be doing something. Otherwise, I'm going to go crazy or drive my spouse crazy or whatever. You know, or some people may not have the financial cushion to wait that long. So it just depends. A lot of it's just personal preference and circumstances, but there are things you can do, even if it's not full time, to try to keep yourself engaged as best you can.
For sure.
I mean,
This is amazing. This is amazing. Jamey, thank you so much. This is really helpful and very specific, very actionable. I really appreciate your advice.
Yeah.
Where can we send people to find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Very easy to find. Jamey, Jamey Cummings. As we talked about before, I make it pretty easy to find, be found. And then the JM search website is an easy way to find me as well.
Certainly. And just kind of to set expectations, I know you're extremely busy with the mandates you're filling. For someone who, just kind of to your point, wants to stay in touch, just kind of an email, hey, Jamey, I heard about you in this podcast. This is my name, this is my role. I'm not currently looking, but I'd like to touch base here and there. Would that be the right approach? Or
I think that's fine. Yeah, and it may not be, like you said, I'm not always going to be able to have a 30-minute phone conversation on the spot with every single person. If there's an opportunity that's specific, well then, you know, it's obviously very opportunity driven. And I've got a broad team who at any given time is working on a variety of roles, and I'm always happy to circulate the resume. You never know where timing may be right that we have something. And, you know, as luck would have it, we talked a little bit about the market. For whatever reason, the last couple of weeks, we've seen an uptick in activity. So I'm feeling bullish that we're going to start to see more movement. So hopefully we'll have more opportunities to talk about here in the near future, my team and I.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Well, again, Jamey, thank you so much. This was amazing, and I hope we'll catch up at our SEO Black Hat.
I look forward to it.
Sounds good. Thank you.